you kind of like start to vote for the first project and then the second and then the third, and you're like, which one can I give a little bit less stars than others? Because they were all very, very good, very high quality. What I have seen that I find quite interesting is like all the ways you can use AI to add a complement to what deterministic layers can do. So for example, like, is your token safe? What's going on outside in the world? If you manage a lot of tokens, how fast can you respond in case there is something? How can you make sure that a smart contract is legit? Like a lot of kind of decision layer, which I think is the biggest challenge when it comes to blockchain security, quite interestingly, that AI can actually complement blockchain to secure blockchain, in the sense that a lot of the attack vectors are not necessarily in the code itself, but they are on all the layers around it. So yeah, I found a couple of projects on that front that were very interesting.
I think the first thing I was impressed with is just the quality of the submissions was like really, really good. At least the ones I looked at were probably the highest caliber I've ever seen in a selection like that, in a hackathon like this. Um, that speaks to one, like the people we're attracting in these hackathons. And then I think probably also because the tools are making it easier for people to build in a hackathon something impressive fast, no? Uh, so innovations everywhere from business models to user interfaces to very core technical stuff as well that I think was very impressive. And I could see some of these things actually moving the space forward.
Why Ethereum? And we tend to work with teams across a variety of different chain ecosystems, but I think when we're talking about fundamentally the value prop of a blockchain as a source of truth, backed by consensus and a certain level of economic security, that is when a lot of the maybe more like idealistic principles start to come into play of, okay, well, what is the economic security of this blockchain versus another? I think another thing that has kind of come up a lot is the composability of the ecosystem, where kind of going from interacting on one chain to another, there's a good amount of effort that's gone into figuring that out with L1s and L2s. But I think the economic security and maybe what some in other chains might call idealism of Ethereum does help in this regard when decentralization and a consensus backed kind of ledger starts to really factor in.
I think one of the things that we're seeing right now, at least from like projects or the market that's it's in crypto and AI, is there's like this big obsession with verifiability at inference, where people are just like focusing on, okay, like can we prove like yeah, if it's correct, or the veracity of the output. But I think that we haven't necessarily spent a lot of energy, at least from my perspective, on like the whole end-to-end cycle. So like are we verifying? I mean, sure, like now we have zk-TLS, so you could have some proof that it originated in Web 2. But I think like building systems which have a notion of like end-to-end verifiability, I think it's very important.
So yeah, welcome again to this session on NewForum. And NewForum is a research network dedicated to open learning in the arts and sciences, pioneering a new culture for internet design. The ETHGlobal Remote Agentic Hackathon just wrapped up, and so congratulations to all the judges, mentors, and developers who contributed. Today, we're here to reflect on the ideas and innovations emerging in the agentic Ethereum ecosystem, as well as new ideas emerging at the intersection of AI and Web3, aka DAI. Our goal is to exchange insights and discuss the future of this rapidly evolving space. And further discussions will take place on NeoS, where we can actually get feedback to each other's ideas and thoughts. We have amazing speakers here today. We have Alfonso from Crossmint, we've got RG from Reppo, And we have Nitya from Para, as well as Sofiane from Newfoundation. So we will get started. So my question to our speakers and to everyone is, here we go. So developers and builders are like mini gods or magicians capable of creating anything and everything. But with such power comes a critical question. How do we ensure these technologies serve humanity rather than becoming distractions? So we can begin the panel with this. And in no particular order, just jump right in.
Definitely not the easiest question to start with. Can I ask a clarification question? When you mean distraction as in more like the sense of being something more like entertainment, or you mean like it could be something malicious as well?
Well, it could be like around the ethical side, because we're building these crazy technologies, and it could either serve humanity or it can do crazy things. And so with agents, with the agentic AI space, with everything just rapidly going, everybody's trying to build the bigger monster, hopefully not. So I'm curious, if you all have some thoughts on it, and if there are any maybe projects that stood out for you at the hackathon. You can also share something that was exciting for you, so we can that you think is bridging this potential unintended consequences.
Yeah, so it's a very timely topic for me because I just had lunch with someone from the European Parliament who was asking a lot of questions about like AI regulations and so on. I think what's interesting is the question of collective choice making, meaning what mechanisms do we use to define the rules around AI and to govern AI? One formula is we will put everything in one data center and we will trust a corporation that's going to be supervised by a board and by regulators. That's one way to do it, creating a massive Frankenstein and then creating another institution to kind of keep the Frankenstein in a leash. The other way is to put things on the blockchain, but it doesn't really it doesn't mean anything, like putting it on chain. Sure, you can trust that it's this model that says that it's, and stuff like that, but it doesn't really define like how do we as a global community decide to, to orient that technological innovation in a direction that works for everyone, and also what does it mean that it works for everyone. And so I think, to me, the most likely scenario is to go directly inside the system, and that AI is actually run through some decentralized governance mechanism where we end up creating some kind of giant blockchain where we have 8 billion people who are part of the consensus, and we kind of like try to find a way to align. So if you think about an LLM as like a DAO, so if everyone has like posted content online and has expressed opinions about what's good, what's valuable, and so on, and you make a synthesis of all those, billions of characters, trillions of characters, whatever, you end up with like, okay, that's the state of like what are the aspirations and what people want. And yeah, then like building on top of that, and maybe it's not necessarily the amount of people or the amount of tokens, but it's maybe things that include some level of like weight. Like you can weight people based on how much they are designated as people who have a valid opinion, kind of like what we do in academia. And yeah, and stuff like that. So that's kind of what I have to say about this topic, and that's where I see the most likely mechanism for alignment of AI.
If I may chime in, I think that was an excellent answer. A couple of thoughts on my end. First, relating it to the hackathon yesterday, but I think it was, well, I judged, I think, around 10 projects, but it was encouraging to see that, well, definitely every project there was, I think ethically positive, but there were some that actually help with, for example, there were a couple that were like projects that actually like make the ecosystem more secure. For example, there was one that used agents to help evaluate whether a transaction is risky or the contents of or a wallet is risky or things like this, which I think could be very positive. But on the ultimate question, I mean, I think this is a question that the entire world is grappling with right now. I'm one to think that technological progress is inevitable. So anything that like tries to slow it down, probably won't work. I think it's more maybe we need to of the tools and technologies that get developed, try where possible to select tools that are auditable. So things where things are built in the open, things are built in a way that they leave maybe cryptographic traces, things like that would at least allow us to, as a whole in humanity, audit how things are going. And I mean, humanity will do whatever it can to self-preserve or to make sure that things gravitate towards the right, the right outcome for everyone. So to the extent that it's observable that things are going south, I think we will all self-correct and like make sure things go well. And to the extent that these things are developed in secret, in closed doors, in certain laboratories, then it's harder for anyone else to help. And if one of those labs, even if ethically they're trying to make things well, they may screw up. It may be harder for others to correct, no? But I don't know. Maybe this is a naive answer.
So I'm Nitya. I'm the founder of a company called Para. We were known as Capsule until very recently, but we basically make it easy to onboard users, do transactions on chain. And so we kind of sit at this intersection of like programmable cryptography as well, which is, I think, the most relevant to what's happening in AI. So with AI, of course, like one of the things that is most that I think is why everyone is so concerned about the dangers are this lack of auditability, this lack of like showing your work, if you will. And this is, of course, like where cryptography can add the most value. So one, one thing we've seen is allowing LLMs to still optimize with respect to goal states, but setting guardrails for this. So one initiative we've worked on with a few AI agent teams is transaction permissions. And this is basically something where you can say, reach this goal state, but do so either only using this set of contracts or without using this other set of contracts. And I mean, this, of course, is isolated to the on-chain transacting world, but similar systems where you can specify guardrails for systems, I think allow us to get the upside benefits of an AI, but allows some downside protection around not knowing whether some maybe like coin trading path to maybe really simplify it, or really whether any kind of means of reaching a goal state went through intermediate steps that are not desired. And so I think we see that cryptography can do a lot for enforcement or for just like setting bounds around a system that is otherwise difficult to control.
Yeah, that kind of brings back this skeuomorphism of smart contracts as contracts and contracts that don't even need like some kind of deferred enforcement where people can do all kinds of stuff and then you have to like find them and sue them and so on. Yeah, I think what you describe is this idea that was the original idea for smart contract, which is can't be evil. And I think the pace at which AI can operate, it cannot be done through some kind of like regulatory system, like bureaucratic system, because it will evolve so fast. It's quite funny when most of the regulations were designed. So, for example, the concept of the EU Act on AI. They had that assumption, which was correct back then, that we would need bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger models with like more and more parameters. And so you would end up in a world that was, on one side, you have the foundation model developers that create those gigantic models that need a lot of compute. And then you have the people who kind of wrap those models, and then you have the kind of people who use them. And they created that regulation. And while they were writing this, we were already shifting from those bigger models to test time compute. which has been happening throughout 23, 24. And yeah, so it was no longer relevant because now you don't need such big models. You can start with small models. You can run them locally at home, and you can create decentralized distributed systems. So yeah, AI is evolving too fast, in my opinion, to be regulated by legal systems just because it doesn't move at the same pace, at the same frequency. And so I really relate to what you said about cryptography being like the kind of guardrails for AI, like the rails and the guardrails. It's kind of both at the same time.
I just wanted to add like a comment. I think one of the things that we're seeing right now, at least from like projects or the market that's it's in crypto and AI is there's like this big obsession with verifiability at inference, where people are just like focusing on, okay, like can we prove like yeah if it's correct, or the veracity of the output. But I think that we haven't necessarily spend a lot of energy, at least from my perspective, on like the whole end-to-end cycle. So like are we verifying? I mean, sure, like now we have zk-TLS, so you could have some proof that it originated in Web 2, but I think like building systems which have a notion of like end-to-end verifiability, I think it's very important. So getting closer to like explainable AI than just claiming that I have a proof that this is the model that said that, instead of like verifying who owns the model, like how all of that happens. So I think that is like a big, both like an opportunity and I feel like a gap that currently exists. And I feel like from like I guess from like a institutional capital perspective, it's hard for them to like price this, or maybe I think are some narratives, or I don't know, like, so I think we haven't seen that. So I think that is something I definitely think more people should focus on.
I'm Ash. My background is product design. I'm working with Navigate. They're trying to be the data marketplace for AI agents. But what I was super like interested when you were talking, Sofiane, if I'm pronouncing your name right, there was this. I don't know if you guys saw it, but there was this research Anthropic put out like 2 weeks ago, showing how AI is already lying. When is base training is against what is being asked for. It's been asked to basically always be helpful. For example, always like try to do your best to answer queries and provide the user with satisfactory answers. But if the user is asking for something that is within his guidelines that it shouldn't be doing, it would lie to you and say it did it. And like a super simple case that it does it on a daily basis for me. I'm not a coder, but I'm a DevRel, so I also make products not knowing how to code. I asked Claude, or whether I think I'm normally using Sonnet when I'm using Cursor, but you would say like, hey, I want you to read this documentation and strictly based on this, like write this code for me. And it would do something and you're like, did you read it? And it would be like, oh, sorry, I should have paid more attention. So it's funny that we're not even close to AGI and that's already happening. So I have zero faith for guardrails, to be honest, because coming from a background of design, of looking at like how when innovation happens, what is the things that takes place for legislation to come out? I don't know if you ever looked at it, but the case is always that we're going to have a car, someone's going to die, and then we're going to think of the traffic laws or the traffic lights and all those things. And 99% of the times, because we don't have a governmental institution, what happens is that someone designs the automatic car, and they're the same body that would fund the university, that would do the research on what should be the laws around these things. So they're always favorable and biased to their own agendas and not really meant for the best things for people.
Yeah, so when I talk about guardrails, I like to take the metaphor of technology and software as like, using the metaphor of the human body. So if you look at the power of blockchain is using a lot of computation to make sure that things are supposed to behave the way they are supposed to behave. And so I would take the analogy of the skeleton here. So like if I move my arm, I can move it like this, I can move it like that, but I cannot go beyond because my skeleton doesn't let me do that. And so that's the blockchain. The blockchain doesn't really, it's not really smart. It doesn't really have power, but what it knows is like this you can do, this you cannot do. And it's using the power of consensus to enforce that with like immutability and predictability and so on. Then you have APIs. APIs, they are more like the muscles. They are like things that have like more power to carry like different tasks and to do like a little bit more sophisticated moves and so on. So they're a bit more flexible. You can build all kinds of interactions and stuff. But they are not that smart and that flexible. And so that's why you need the brain. And so AI is more the brain. So the question is like, if your mind wants to do things that your skeleton doesn't allow you to do, then you just cannot do it. And so I think that's how those things can be wrapped nicely together, saying that, yeah, if the guardrails are inside the brain, then of course it's easy to break. Like if you tell people like, hey, don't move your leg to the top of your head or whatever, like if it's just a brain construct for sure. But if it's really at the skeleton level, you just cannot do it. So that's kind of like how I see the ideal architecture. But then the question is like, is the skeleton of the other guy dangerous to, so like you can control only what you design. And so I think using blockchain to secure the most important infrastructures, like anything that's sensible should be, I think, protected with some form of governance. And so then you can build whatever AI on top of that, but there are things that those things cannot do. Like, for example, the cameras inside your flat. Like if you have cameras at home, around your home, this should not be on the internet. It should be distributed. It should be decentralized. Because if you just say, oh, we're going to pass laws that says it's not legal to do it, people are going to do it. While if it's like encrypted or if it has like some hard-coded limitations, then you can be safe around what AI will do with it.
So to the judges and mentors and those of you who participated in the hackathon, I'm curious to know, were there any surprising things that stood out for you? Was there something that was super surprising for you? And what do you think Ethereum offers agents that differentiates them from other alternatives?
Hey, Alfonso here. I'll just do a quick intro. I'm one of the founders at Crossmint. We have a suite of developer tools that make it easier to bring apps, agents, and other things on chains, including wallets, payments, tokenization, and other APIs. So I was one of the judges in the hackathon. I think the first thing I was impressed with is just the quality of the submissions was like really, really good. At least the ones I looked at were probably the highest caliber I've ever seen in a selection like that, in a hackathon like this. That speaks to one, like the people we're attracting in these hackathons. And then I think probably also because the tools are making it easier for people to build in a hackathon something impressive fast. No, I don't want to highlight the specific project too much, as I think we haven't selected the winners yet and don't want to cause any kind of bias. But so innovations everywhere, from business models to user interfaces to very core technical stuff as well, that I think was very impressive. And I could see some of these things actually moving the space forward. You had another question that I'm just blanking on. What was the other question? If we saw anything interesting, and then, why Ethereum potentially poses a better alternative. If you're building AI agents, I think in general, having a blockchain, we already touched on it in the prior question a lot, but I think it provides two benefits. One, the guardrails that we already touched upon, so I'm not gonna elaborate on more. And then the second is the more like rails. If you want your agent to be able to pay another person, buy goods and services, or even do more complex financial transactions, it's just really hard to do this with Web2 APIs, with credit card, for example, that have a lot of protections precisely for anti-botting, have very high fees, very like bad settlement. In general, I think agents are having a bad agentic experience when you see projects that are trying to like buy a pizza in the internet in other hackathons using credit card. none of those have scaled to production. Things like Perplexity tried purchasing things with credit card, and the reviews were pretty appalling on Twitter. And they're looking at crypto now, it seems like, from Arvin's Twitter account. I think in general, it's better agent experience for anything that's financial related. And Ethereum versus other chains, we could go into that if that was part of your question. So here you have to compare chain by chain basis, but I think in Ethereum, what I've seen is there's first the most already open source contributions in the space, so the more things that you can reuse. I think just other chains have a bit of a less of a like open source mentality. I don't want to name names specifically, but Ethereum has some like basically the Ethereum ecosystem has definitely an advantage there. And then the second, also to be honest, Solidity as a language has the best developer experience probably amongst all blockchains. This contributes to there being more open source code, but in general helps people innovate faster. One of the things that we mentioned earlier, if we want to move as fast as AI on the programmatic guardrail side, we also need a language that's easy to build things on and audit them later. And the tooling, the language, etc., that we have in Ethereum is just like doesn't exist in other chains yet.
Yeah, on my side, it was quite impressive. It was very difficult to you kind of like start to vote for the first project and then the second and then the third, and you're like, which one can I give a little bit less stars than others, because they were all very, very good, very high quality. Without naming specific, because thanks for mentioning that the final decision is not live, but what I have seen that I find quite interesting is like all the ways you can use AI to add a complement to what deterministic layers can do. So for example, like, is your token safe? What's going on outside in the world? If you manage a lot of tokens, how fast can you respond in case there is something? How can you make sure that a smart contract is legit? Like a lot of kind of decision layer, which I think is the biggest challenge when it comes to blockchain security, quite interestingly, that AI can actually complement blockchain to secure blockchain, in the sense that a lot of the attack vectors are not necessarily in the code itself, but they are on all the layers around it. So yeah, I found a couple of projects on that front that were very interesting. And then tools to help facilitate the use of blockchain, like making it easy to launch project, to launch tokens, to basically all the things that humans do around blockchain. So yeah, I haven't seen so much the use of cryptography or blockchain to secure AI, but I've seen a lot of things that can accelerate the use of blockchain through innovative solutions around that. And about Ethereum, well, it's the project that has the highest, let's say, liquidity, history, community, and so on. So that's definitely very attractive. Then I feel also it's an ecosystem that has people who tend to be a bit more, it's very nuanced here, but a bit more interested in like long-term vision and stuff like that, versus like more recent blockchain projects which kind of started like this whole in the degen phase. So, a lot of people who came in crypto around 2013 are like the OGs who came because they cared about the values, while people who came around 2017 onwards were more and more towards like making money and playing the casino game. So I think the younger the blockchains, the more likely you will find of like that kind of like more like playing around with NFTs and meme coins, while people who have been around in the crypto space for 10 years now, I think Ethereum, there is a higher density of people who like care more about the ethos.
I can build on that a little bit. So I think one additional why Ethereum, and we tend to work with teams across a variety of different chain ecosystems, but I think when we're talking about fundamentally the value prop of a blockchain as a source of truth, backed by consensus and a certain level of economic security, that is when a lot of the maybe more like idealistic principles start to come into play of, okay, well, what is the economic security of this blockchain versus another? I think another thing that that has kind of come up a lot is the composability of the ecosystem, where kind of going from interacting on one chain to another, there's a good amount of effort that's gone into figuring that out with L1s and L2s. But I think the economic security and maybe what some in other chains might call idealism of Ethereum does help in this regard when decentralization and a consensus-backed kind of ledger starts to really factor in.
It does feel every chain has their own culture, right? Like it definitely matters.
Yes, definitely. I hear a lot like Solana. Solana is the chain for agents, but yeah. And I wonder why.
I have a couple of thoughts there. We work with some teams across both ecosystems. The general view I've seen is, well, one, I think a monolithic or like a single chain architecture with many smart contracts does make certain functionality easier, as opposed to the number of times one might need to bridge between chains. That can help a lot. I think the other thing that I've noticed is the community has made some very that has just like made some frameworks that have gotten great adoption, that have made it easy to kind of spin up new agents. So there's a variety of different initiatives. One that we spent some time with is Send AI. But I think one thing that that some of the Solana teams have done have made these kind of opinionated defaults around how you can spin up agents that I think has possibly contributed to the speed to get a new agent spun up.
On my end, we work with a lot of agents and agent launchpads. My take on this would be a bit different. What we've seen is there's a lot of today a lot of agents monetize through having a meme coin or token associated with it, and Solana right now definitely has the highest liquidity and amount of traders for those tokens. So if you want to monetize more likely that you will do it there effectively. As for on-chain execution, I would say the biggest thing that we've seen is cross-chain agents. People tend to have maybe if they launch in a single, they may launch in a single chain, but they all have in the roadmap adding more chains as well. And many launch directly with wallets in both EVM and Solana ecosystems from the ones we've seen. So I think to some extent, I feel like there's a bit of a confusion in the narrative of when people say, okay, agents are moving to Solana, that it's more like the agent launchpads or the tokens associated with them, which sometimes maybe what matters to some people, to people trading or things like this. But where are the agents operating? That changes a lot agent by agent. And depending on the use cases, for example, you want to do betting in Polymarket, you have to be in Polygon. If you have to interact with, I don't know, like Seaport or things like that, you have to be in EVM. And I think my bet would be the future. I mean, agents make it easy. Like when agents basically can handle all the complexity of doing cross-chain, I think fairly well. And so I think what we would see is actually probably that the agents will just use the chains where the assets they want to access or the contracts they want to access have where those assets are, much more so than humans who are maybe have a lot of fatigue of like jumping through chains and so on. But we'll see. But I think that's optimistic for, at the end of the day, the chains that have the best technologies, the best assets, and things like that.
I'm quite curious on the fly. I see that your platform is very muscular. Back to the metaphor earlier about APIs being the muscles. What's your distinction between tools for AI agents and APIs? And yeah, do you see basically all the APIs becoming potentially a tool for an agent? I meant on Crossmint.
I think so. I mean, at the end of the day, like how agent frameworks are defining tools are this is a bit like in the Matrix, when they installed like scales on your brain. It's a combination of um, natural language prompts or examples that the agent can understand, that the LLM can understand, and then a conversion to code that executes, that is actuates on that tool that ends up performing an action in the real world. And so APIs directly are not tools. You need around it the translation, the semantic layer of what does this tool do and so on. And the converse is true. You could, I guess, maybe have a tool that doesn't really invoke an API, it may just run local code. But I do think that both are very related. I think we will see a lot of toolkits. Actually, across we maintain one called Goat SDK, but I think we're going to see a lot of toolkits that are basically doing this glue of take APIs that exist and make those very easy to use from agentic frameworks. And you see that in Web3, you see that in Web2 with companies like Composio, or there's open source toolkits as well. But fundamentally, I do think that also agents natively understand tools, and I think every company that has APIs will want to expose their APIs as tools in one way or another. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, definitely. So what you are saying is API is not enough. We need to make that API easily readable by agents so they can basically orchestrate on the fly and find what they need to execute what they want. And completely agree with that. But yeah, I definitely see the path for Crossmint to be a very big component in this agent economy.
I'm curious to know why is X the sort of chosen platform for agents, and why is the whole agentic wave like happening there? Like X is a Web2 platform, and if Elon decides that I'm gonna shut down everything, then what happens? So I'm curious to know, do we have alternatives in the space that any of you know of? That's Sofiane, where we can talk a bit about maybe new OS, but it's open to everyone as well.
I have thoughts on this because I think Sofiane and I had a chat about this as well last month, I think. Yeah, I think this is like a challenge that, we're solving at Reppo, where our belief is that right now, most of the agents are taking a dependency on, some Web2, like X feeds or like an LLM. And I think just putting the agent on a blockchain does not mean that it's decentralized, right, by any means. So I think we do need new and novel data sources that are both permissionless, decentralized, but also have niche and specialized data sources. So I think one thing that excites me about kind of what Newfound is doing is you can have an agent that was tasked to do a certain, like, let's say it was tasked to execute a certain trading strategy, and it was given a risk profile and a budget, a wallet. It has some sort of autonomy on discovering, negotiating, and committing to novel data pipelines and data sets, where if it does not have access to X, it should be able to go and find that data set, let's say on Newcoin or another platform. So I think I think we need more and more. And I think this is something I was just typing in the chat. I think right now, I think there's this big obsession with building launch pads and building agents. Like everyone's launching their own framework, which I think is great. I think more people, there should be more innovation on like the builders front. But I think that we haven't necessarily given a lot of attention on kind of the growth stage, right? So I think everyone's focused on this bootstrap capital and not a lot on like growth capital for agents, which I think is something we need to pay more attention to.
Yeah, I think for me the big challenge around using platforms like Telegram and Twitter and so on, I think it's even truer about X, is that those are platforms that are trying to make a discernment who is a human versus who is a bot, which leads them to track and detect like behaviors, like things like, how you move your mouse and how likely is the thing behind the computer an actual human. I think that, in my opinion, that's the wrong way to look at it, because at the end of the day, an internet user wants quality. And so if that quality comes from an AI or from a human used by an AI or a human using an AI, like we are becoming cyborgs anyway. Like how much of our information is going through an algorithm already? So like, if we think about it, like X is using a bot on us. So it's like it's a bot that's like spamming us with content that it has carefully like curated for us. So they use AI to create content. We all use AI to generate, to help us write, to help us ideate, and so on. So I think the real question is like, what is quality? What is a good internet user? What is a qualitative output? Because this is the kind of assessment that is becoming increasingly difficult to make within synthetic data, within organic data, within online posts, within websites. Like when you use ChatGPT and you say, hey, give me the best burger place. What does it know about burger places? It's just going to go on Google or on Bing or whatever. It's going to search the web and it's going to repeat whatever it found on a blog about, that burger is the best or whatever. And I think that's the kind of problems that's the kind of limitation that we have, which is defining what is good, what is value. And so that's kind of, so in the case of NewOS, instead of trying to focus on detecting if someone is a human or a machine, it's more about whomever you are, is what you do valuable? And then if it is valuable, and if it is taking part in that social consensus, then some people are going to find that data useful to train their models. You can do reinforcement learning. You can do all kinds of stuff once you know the difference, like once you have that feedback loop.
And to everyone watching, I'd like to invite you to check out our space where we'll be capturing insights during this conversation and after this conversation together with AI agents. And if you want to know more about projects mentioned here, feel free to start a conversation with those agents on NewOS anytime to learn more and dive deeper. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Salimi. Thank you, everyone. Have a nice evening.